I was standing in line at the grocery store, tapping my debit card nervously against my palm, when I saw the man ahead of me freeze. His hands trembled as he fumbled through his wallet, pulling out a few faded bills, coins clinking like tiny apologies. The cashier's eyes flickered with impatience, the line behind us shifted inside, and I could feel the sharp edge of judgment filling the air. Something inside me tugged. Maybe it was the way his shoulders slumped, as if the weight of the world had just pressed down harder. Maybe it was because I knew what it felt like to be short on change, exposed under the fluorescent lights with strangers staring. I didn't think, I just acted. "I'll cover it," I said, sliding my card across the reader before he could protest. He turned toward me, startled, his gray eyes deep-set and unreadable. There was no outburst of gratitude, no effusive thanks, just the briefest pause, as though he were measuring me. Then he gave a small nod, almost imperceptible, and gathered his bags. For a moment, I wondered if I had offended him somehow. But when I walked out into the cold evening air, there he was, waiting near the cart return. He looked at me with the same quiet intensity, and in a voice low and deliberate, he said, "You have no idea what you've just done." That line, cryptic, unsettling, echoed in my head long after he disappeared into the parking lot. I thought it was just a passing encounter, a ripple in an ordinary day. I couldn't have imagined that the man whose groceries I paid for would reappear in my life in the most impossible, entangled way. Inside the world of my fiancé's company, where secrets were currency and nothing was ever as it seemed. When I got home that night, I brushed it off as one of those bizarre city encounters, fleeting, strange, and unexplainable. My fiancé, Daniel, was already at the dining table with his laptop open, spreadsheets glowing on the screen. Numbers always made sense to him, even when people didn't. I slid into the chair across from him, telling him half-jokingly about the man at the grocery store. I paid for his stuff, just bread and milk, really. And he looked at me like I'd just signed a contract in blood, I said with a laugh. Daniel didn't laugh. He didn't even smile. He just raised his eyes, sharp behind his glasses, and asked, "What exactly did he say to you?" I repeated the man's strange words. Daniel's brow furrowed, but then he shook his head, as if dismissing a thought too reckless to voice. "Probably just embarrassed," he muttered, closing the laptop a little too quickly. But that was Daniel. Precise, careful, unwilling to reveal what was happening in the depths of his mind. I loved that about him, or at least I told myself I did. He was the kind of man who built order out of chaos, who made me feel like the storms of my own past could finally quiet. Still, that night, as I lay beside him listening to the hum of his steady breathing, my thoughts kept circling back to the stranger. His face, his tone, that cryptic sentence. It lodged itself in my chest like a shard of glass I couldn't cough out. Over the next week, I buried myself in wedding planning and my own deadlines, but odd coincidences began to stack up. A black car parked outside our apartment twice in the same spot. A call that went silent the moment I answered. Daniel, suddenly evasive when I asked simple questions about his work. And then came the dinner, a company gathering. Daniel said, nothing fancy, just a chance for me to meet some of the key people he worked with. I walked in expecting handshakes and polite small talk. What I didn't expect was to see him, the man from the grocery store, sitting at the head of the table, watching me with those same gray, unreadable eyes. The clink of wine glasses and the murmur of conversation blurred into static the moment our eyes locked. My stomach lurched. The stranger, my stranger, sat composed, his suit impeccably tailored, his expression unreadable. If he recognized me, he gave no sign. Daniel leaned close, his hand on the small of my back. "That's Mr. Hale," he whispered. "One of our investors. He doesn't usually come to these things. It's a big deal he's here tonight." Investor. The word hit me like a slap. Just days ago, I thought he couldn't afford groceries. And now here he was, head of the table, being treated with reverence by everyone around him. My brain scrambled to reconcile the contradiction. When the introductions came around, Daniel placed his hand on my shoulder proudly. "This is my fiancé," he said. Mr. Hale's gaze lingered on me a beat too long before he inclined his head. "We've met," he said quietly, his lips curling into the faintest ghost of a smile. Nobody else seemed to notice, but my heart began pounding so loud I swore the whole table could hear it. The rules of the evening quickly revealed themselves. This was not a dinner, it was a chess match. Words were weighed, silences sharpened. Daniel's colleagues leaned forward with eager laughter at Hale's rare comments, but underneath it all was a tension I couldn't name. Money was power, and Mr. Hale, silent or not, held the board. I tried to act normal, sipping my wine, laughing when it was expected. But every time I glanced up, he was watching me, not hungrily, not cruelly, but like a mathematician observing a complex equation. After dessert, when conversations fractured into side groups, Hale finally approached me. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. Standing close enough that his presence pinned me in place, he murmured, "You don't understand what you stepped into that day. But you will." I opened my mouth to respond, but Daniel appeared at my side, smiling tightly, sliding an arm protectively around me. The message was clear, don't. And that's when I realized, whatever game was being played here, I had just become a piece on the board. In the days after the dinner, I felt as if I were living inside a riddle with missing pieces. Every time I thought about Mr. Hale, his quiet menace, his contradictions, I found myself chasing answers that evaporated the moment I reached for them. I started small, almost playfully. I Googled him. Nothing. No LinkedIn, no official company photo, not even an old conference panel recording. For a man who could apparently write million-dollar checks, he had left no digital footprint. That in itself was unsettling. Then I began watching Daniel more closely. At first, it was subtle. Late nights explained away with vague phrases. Sudden calls he would take in another room. He brushed off my questions with an easy smile, but his eyes betrayed something else, calculation, maybe even fear. One evening, when he fell asleep on the couch, his phone lit up beside him. A text flashed across the screen. "Hale says she's smarter than you think." My breath caught. She. Me. The paranoia grew teeth after that. At the office mixer, I caught whispers cutting off when I entered the room. A man I'd never met before slipped me a folded napkin, and when I opened it later in the bathroom, there was just one word scrawled in neat handwriting: run. And yet I didn't. Instead, I leaned in. I became obsessed with decoding the puzzle of Hale and his invisible strings. Why the grocery store? Why me? Why was my small act of kindness treated like some kind of transaction with cosmic weight? One night, unable to bear the silence anymore, I drove back to that same grocery store. I parked in the exact spot I had before, as if retracing my steps might trigger the universe to reveal its trick. But all I found was an empty cart rattling in the wind, until I turned back toward my car. And there he was, Hale, waiting in the shadows like he had known I would come back. "Curiosity," he said, stepping into the glow of the street lamp, "is both a gift and a weapon. Which one it becomes for you depends on whether you're ready to hear the truth." And I realized this wasn't just a puzzle anymore. It was a test. I stood frozen under the harsh glow of the street lamp, my breath fogging in the night air. Hale's presence was magnetic and terrifying all at once, like standing too close to the edge of a cliff. "Why me?" I asked, my voice trembling despite the steel I tried to lace into it. "Why that night? Why the groceries?" For a long moment, he just studied me. His silence was a weight, pressing me down, forcing me to confront every doubt and fear I'd buried since meeting him. Then, finally, he spoke. "You think you bought me dinner," he said quietly. "But what you really did was show me who you are. Generosity without calculation. Do you know how rare that is, in a room full of people like Daniel?" The mention of my fiancé's name landed like a punch. Hale stepped closer, lowering his voice until it was almost a whisper. "I don't invest in companies. I invest in people. Daniel thinks I'm betting on him. But it was never him I was watching." My heart thudded against my ribs. "You're saying you invested because of me?" A flicker of something. Was it amusement? Sadness crossed his face. "Because of what you represent. Daniel hides things from you, doesn't he? He believes control is strength. But control without conscience." He let the words hang, unfinished, and the silence screamed louder than any conclusion. Pieces began to click together in my mind, fragments of overheard conversations and evasive answers. Daniel's late nights, the warning on the napkin, the look in Hale's eyes across the dinner table. This wasn't just business. It was a test of loyalty, morality, maybe even survival. Hale wasn't some forgotten old man at the grocery store. He was the invisible hand steering the fate of the company, of my fiancé, of me. "You've been watching me," I said, more accusation than question. His gaze didn't waver. "I've been waiting to see what kind of choice you make when the moment comes." And with that, he walked away into the dark, leaving me shaking in the parking lot, clutching the terrifying knowledge that I wasn't just engaged to a man. I was entangled in a game I didn't understand. But now I had a new question burning inside me. When the moment came, whose side would I be on? After that night in the parking lot, sleep abandoned me. Every creak of the apartment, every hum of Daniel's phone vibrating on the nightstand sent adrenaline surging through my veins. I was caught in a tug of war, between love and suspicion, trust and dread. Daniel noticed my distraction, of course. "You've been somewhere else lately," he said one morning, brushing his tie smooth in the mirror. His reflection caught mine, and for the first time, I wondered, did he already know I'd seen Hale again? The walls started closing in fast. Hale's words clung to me, echoing in quiet moments. It was never him I was watching. I tried to convince myself it was paranoia, but then the evidence piled higher. One evening, I overheard Daniel on the phone, his voice sharp, urgent. "No, she doesn't know. And she won't. I'll handle it." Another day, I found a locked drawer in his desk, the key hidden too carefully for me to believe it was innocent. When I finally worked up the nerve to open it, I discovered stacks of papers, contracts, but not the kind that smelled of legality. Words like offshore accounts and dummy corporation leapt out at me. My stomach churned. And then there was Hale, always in the periphery. A black car parked down the block. A slip of paper tucked into my handbag at a cafe. "Trust your instincts." The more I uncovered, the clearer it became. Daniel wasn't just evasive. He was hiding something dangerous. And Hale, with his unnerving stillness, wasn't warning me to run anymore. He was daring me to choose. I started playing my own game, smiling at Daniel at dinner, asking questions in a casual tone while secretly memorizing every deflection. I became hyper-aware of the smallest details, whose names he mentioned, which nights he came home later than usual. But the closer I looked, the more I realized that Daniel wasn't just lying to me. He was lying to everyone. And then came the night that changed everything. A company gala, bright lights and champagne, where Daniel was supposed to give a triumphant speech about their next phase of expansion. But when Hale entered the room, the air shifted. Everyone turned, and I saw Daniel's face drain of color. That was the moment I knew. Whatever Hale was holding over Daniel, it was about to break free. The gala shimmered with gold light, champagne bubbles rising in crystal flutes, laughter bouncing off marble walls. On the surface, it was celebration. But underneath, the air buzzed with an electric unease. My dress clung to my skin, but it wasn't the fabric making me sweat. It was the way Daniel's hand gripped mine too tightly, his smile stretched too thin. Hale arrived late, of course. He didn't need to command attention. Attention rearranged itself around him. The crowd parted instinctively as he entered, his presence a gravitational pull. He didn't look at Daniel. He didn't look at the executives or the investors. He looked at me. Daniel's speech began. He spoke in practice cadences, promising innovation, expansion, profit. But I couldn't hear the words. I was too busy watching Hale, who stood at the back, still as stone, his eyes trained on me. Then, halfway through Daniel's glowing proclamation, the lights flickered. Once, twice, a glitch maybe, or maybe not, because when they steadied again, Hale was gone. Panic crawled through me. I scanned the room, heart pounding, until I spotted him in a shadowed corner. And he wasn't alone. He was speaking quietly with two men I didn't recognize, men whose faces were sharp with intent. I slipped away from Daniel's side, weaving through the glittering crowd until I reached Hale. Before I could speak, he turned, as though he'd been waiting for me. "It's time," he said simply. "Time for what?" I whispered, my throat dry. "To see him for who he is." He led me down a side corridor, the music and chatter fading behind us. And there, through a glass wall, I saw Daniel, my Daniel, meeting with another group of men. His posture was tense, his words clipped, his hands moving in sharp, practiced gestures. The papers exchanged weren't contracts. They were ledgers, coded documents, filled with transactions that screamed corruption. My knees threatened to give way. Hale's voice was calm, almost pitying. He's not the man you thought you were marrying. He never was. Tears blurred my vision. Why are you showing me this? Why not the authorities? Hale's expression hardened. Because you're the key. He won't break for me. But for you? He might. The truth hit me like a wrecking ball. This wasn't about money or business anymore. This was about leverage. About love being weaponized. And I was standing in the crossfire. I pressed my palm against the cold glass, watching Daniel laugh with men whose smiles never touched their eyes. My fiancé, the man who'd promised me safety, a future, a life together, was entangled in something rotten. Hale's words burned in my ear. He won't break for me. But for you? He might. That night, when the gala ended and the champagne glasses clinked for the last toast, I carried the weight of a secret too heavy to disguise. Daniel held me close as we left, but his warmth felt counterfeit, a performance. Every beat of my heart whispered betrayal. At home, I finally asked the question that had been clawing at me. Who are you really working for? Daniel froze. His eyes darted, calculating, assessing. What did Hale tell you? His voice was sharp, not scared. And that, more than anything, terrified me. I realized then that Hale hadn't just been testing Daniel. He'd been testing me. And the choice was no longer abstract. I reached for my phone, my thumb hovering over the dial pad, the weight of Hale's unspoken demand heavy in the room. Daniel's face changed. Anger, then desperation, then something like fear. He stepped closer, his voice low. Don't do this. Everything I've built, everything we have, it all disappears if you make that call. But the truth was, what we had was already gone. Trust is fragile, and once shattered, it can't be glued back together. With shaking hands, I dialed the number Hale had slipped into my bag days earlier. Within minutes, the house was surrounded, dark cars, silent men. Daniel's empire collapsed in real time, his secrets dragged into the light. And Hale? He appeared like a shadow in the doorway, watching as Daniel was taken away. His expression was unreadable, but when our eyes met, I understood. I hadn't just ended an engagement. I had crossed a threshold into a new world, one where morality and survival blurred. You've chosen, Hale said quietly, and now you'll have to live with what that choice means. I thought I would feel relief. Instead, I felt the crushing weight of legacy. Because Hale hadn't just dismantled Daniel's lies, he had woven me into his game. My act of kindness at the grocery store had spiraled into a destiny I never asked for. And somewhere deep inside, I knew this wasn't an ending. It was an initiation. Weeks later, the apartment was quiet in a way that didn't feel like peace. It felt like aftermath. Daniel's things were gone. The closet half empty, the desk drawers bare. I had boxed up the wedding invitations, tucked them in the back of a closet, as if hiding them could erase the version of me who once believed in forever. The news painted Daniel as a fallen executive, a man who had gambled recklessly with power and lost. But the headlines never mentioned the shadow figure behind it all, Hale. He remained invisible, untouchable, as though he had never existed outside of my memory. And yet reminders lingered. A black car parked across the street that left the moment I noticed it. A fresh bouquet delivered to my door with no card. A single line of text on my phone from an unknown number. You made the right choice. Some nights, I stared at the ceiling and wondered if I really had. Did I save myself? Or had I simply traded one cage for another, gilded with the illusion of freedom? Hale had promised nothing, but his silence spoke volumes. He was still watching, still waiting. The strange part was, I wasn't afraid anymore. Somewhere in the wreckage of betrayal, I had found a sliver of strength. I had faced the truth, even when it shattered the life I thought I wanted. And maybe that was the test all along. Not loyalty to Daniel, not obedience to Hale, but loyalty to myself. Now, whenever I walk past that grocery store, I think about how it all began. One small, impulsive act of kindness paid forward into a story I never could have imagined. A reminder that every choice is a doorway, every moment a hinge on which our lives swing open. And so I'll leave you with this. If you ever find yourself standing in line, watching a stranger fumble for change, ask yourself, what would you do? Would you step in, not knowing what it might cost? Because sometimes the smallest decisions are the ones that change everything.